"That name belongs to my niece," the lawyer announced. "Elizabeth Harris." Chairs scraped, voices rose. I stood to leave. My name was Nora Bennett. I was only the nurse who held Harold Whitmore's hand in his last months. I had no place in a velvet-paneled boardroom where old money weighed more than oxygen. Then the lawyer turned, looked straight at me and asked, "Miss Harris, what is your full legal name?" The room went still. A clock ticked. Somewhere ice clinked in a crystal glass. Nora. "Elizabeth Bennett," I said. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone braver. "Spelled exactly as on your birth certificate," he pressed. "Yes." A low murmur rippled through the Whitmore clan cousins in dark suits, a widow in pearls, a nephew gripping a pen like a weapon. The words on the will did not change, but their faces did. In an instant, I was no longer invisible. I was a question none of them wanted asked. What if the woman they dismissed as the help was the heir they had been hunting for decades? What if a dying man's last kindness uncovered a family truth powerful enough to rewrite every claim in this room? My name is Nora Bennett, 32 years old. A registered nurse who lived paycheck to paycheck in a second-floor walk-up above a laundromat on the east side of town. My world was small, 12-hour shifts at the hospital microwave dinners, eaten in scrubs and the faint hum of dryers below me that rattled through the night. I had no family left, or so I thought. My mother died 2 years earlier after a long battle with emphysema, and my father had vanished when I was still a toddler. What I carried of her was a single keepsake, a silver locket shaped like a teardrop dulled with age. Inside was a photo of her as a child, and folded so tightly I feared it would tear a faded scrap of handwriting. The words were nearly illegible, but one phrase still stood out. "To my Lizzie, never forget who you are." I had always assumed Lizzie was a nickname between her and her own mother. I never asked too many questions. My days were filled with exhaustion and routine. Up before dawn, rushing to catch the bus pouring coffee into a paper cup, while rehearsing in my head which patients needed wound dressings, who needed encouragement, who would need me to hold their hand while they cried. Hospitals don't pay in gratitude, but moments of humanity were what kept me going. So when the agency called about a private case, an aging billionaire named Harold Whitmore, they warned me he was difficult. The last nurse had lasted only 10 days before storming out. He throws things, he insults, but the family is desperate. "Double pay," the coordinator whispered, as if the bribe itself carried shame. I should have said no. I was already stretched thin between hospital shifts and side work, but double pay meant rent caught up, maybe even enough to replace the hole in my shoe I stuffed with cardboard. I told myself I would meet him once, see if it was manageable. The Whitmore estate was nothing like the sterile hallways I knew. The gates groaned open to reveal manicured gardens, marble fountains, and windows tall enough to swallow my entire apartment building. Inside, silence pressed heavy, broken only by the ticking of grandfather clocks and the occasional cough from the man I had come to care for. Harold Whitmore was 78, sharp-eyed, even as illness bent his frame into a leather chair by the window. Another one, he muttered when I entered, his voice dry as paper. "How long do you think you'll last?" I didn't flinch. Instead, I sat so we were eye to eye. "Depends," I said. "How long do you think you'll need a nurse?" A flicker of surprise passed across his face. Most people probably groveled or recoiled. I did neither. Maybe that's why he kept me. In the days that followed, I began to see the man behind the fortune. Demanding, yes, but also witty, restless, afraid of being left behind with nothing but bank accounts and vultures for kin. He tested me with harsh words, but beneath them was loneliness, raw and unguarded. And me, I gave him what I gave every patient's honesty, the kind of care no paycheck could measure. I treated him like a man, not a fortune waiting to be carved. I had no idea then how closely he was watching, how carefully he listened to my stories about my mother, about growing up without family, about the locket I kept hidden in my nightstand drawer. To me, I was just a nurse doing her best. To him, I was something else entirely, an answer to a question he had carried for decades. If Harold Whitmore was a storm contained in a single man, then his family was the thundercloud that gathered around him, waiting for the downpour of inheritance. The first time I met them was on a Sunday afternoon, just 2 weeks into my assignment. I had settled Harold in the garden with a blanket and a volume of Shakespeare when the front gates yawned open. A line of luxury cars rolled across the gravel, gleaming black and silver like a procession of armored beasts. Out stepped the Whitmore clan, perfectly pressed suits and heels, clicking against stone as if they had rehearsed the performance of power. At their center was Robert Whitmore, Harold's nephew. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a jaw set as hard as the marble busts lining the mansion halls, Robert carried himself like a man who had already claimed the throne. He was the kind of man who shook hands like a challenge and looked at me as though I were part of the furniture. Another nurse, he scoffed that day, tossing his coat into the arms of a servant. "This one won't last either. You should let me hire proper staff, Uncle. People who know their place." Harold's lips twitched, but he said nothing. He simply glanced at me as if measuring how I would respond. I smiled faintly and adjusted the blanket around his shoulders. That tiny act, choosing not to rise to Robert's insult, earned me the first ghost of approval in Harold's eyes. The Whitmore family embodied wealth in ways I had only ever seen on television. They arrived in couture, dripping with jewels that could have covered my rent for a decade. Their conversations revolved around stock portfolios, ski resorts in Switzerland, and who was sleeping with whom in society circles. Inside the mansion, the gathering continued in Harold's study, a cavernous room paneled in dark oak walls, lined with books that smelled of dust and leather. A chandelier glittered overhead. Robert positioned himself near the fireplace, the power spot, as though he already owned the room. "This place," he declared loudly, "is wasted on the old man. When the time comes, I'll turn it into something useful. A hotel, perhaps. Something that makes money." Harold raised an eyebrow. "You mean something that drains money, Robert? Hotels are vanity projects. You'd run it into the ground in 6 months." The room rippled with forced laughter. Robert's glare found me again, sharp as glass. "And what about you, nurse? Has my uncle told you how to fold his napkins yet, or do you just sit here listening to him whine?" I swallowed hard, my hands tightening around the armrest of Harold's chair, but Harold beat me to it. "She listens better than most people in this family," he said evenly, "which is why she's here, and why you are not." The silence that followed was heavy enough to choke on. Robert's face burned red, but he smiled thinly, masking fury behind his teeth. I realized then that this was no ordinary family squabble. This was a battlefield, and I was standing in the middle without armor. The others weren't much better. Harold's cousins fluttered like vultures, whispering about antiques they intended to claim. A widow in pearls dabbed her eyes, though her gaze never strayed far from the diamond cufflinks on Harold's wrists. Every interaction carried the same undercurrent: greed, entitlement, a hunger sharpened by decades of waiting. And through it all, Robert watched me, cold assessing as if trying to uncover what game I was playing. I had none, of course, but in a family like his, innocence itself was suspicious. That night, after the cars vanished into the dark, Harold looked at me with weary eyes. "Do you see them now?" he asked. "Yes," I whispered. "I see them." "Good," he said, "because they'll see you, too. And when that day comes, you'll need to be ready." At the time, I didn't understand. But I would. It happened one rainy afternoon when thunder rattled the stained glass windows of the Whitmore estate. Harold insisted on holding court in his study despite the pain that bent his body. He wanted company, and company came in the form of his circling family. Robert arrived first, dragging the storm in with him. His voice filled the room before he even crossed the threshold. "Still alive, Uncle Remarkable. I told the others you'd outlast us all out of sheer spite." Laughter followed brittle and hollow from cousins who clustered like shadows behind him. I was there, standing at Harold's side with his medication and a glass of water. My presence barely registered until Robert decided it should. "Tell me, nurse," he said, loudly turning so everyone could hear. "How much are they paying you to play caretaker? Or do you get compensated in promises? Whispers that you'll be looked after. Once the old man finally kicks off." Heat surged up my neck, but before I could reply, Harold snapped enough. His voice was sharp, but his hand trembled as he set down the glass. "You mistake kindness for ambition, Robert. That's your failing, not hers." Robert smirked. "Kindness doesn't come free. Not in this house." His eyes flicked toward me. "She's clever, I'll give her that. Positioning herself here, listening, watching. Who's to say she isn't taking notes on what she can steal?" The words landed like blows. A murmur rippled through the room, cousins exchanging sly glances. One aunt gasped theatrically, clutching her pearls. "I don't steal," I said quietly, though my voice shook. "I came here to do my job." Robert stepped closer, towering over me, his cologne sharp and suffocating. "Really? Then how do you explain this?" From his pocket, he produced a small velvet pouch. He spilled its contents onto the table, an antique ring, heavy gold with an emerald stone. Gasps filled the air. "That's missing from the vault," Robert announced triumphantly. "And I found it in her quarters." My heart stopped. I had never seen the ring before. My knees weakened as whispers filled the study. Thief, manipulator, playing the poor nurse. "I didn't." My protest died in my throat. Robert leaned close, his voice low but sharp enough for all to hear. "The help always thinks they're invisible. But nothing in this house goes unnoticed." The room had turned into a jury, their verdict already forming. Only Harold's gaze anchored me. His sharp eyes studied Robert, then flicked to me. For a long, unbearable moment, silence reigned. Finally, Harold's frail voice cut through. "Bring it here." Robert placed the ring into his uncle's palm with exaggerated care. Harold studied it under the lamplight. His thin lips curved not into a smile, but something colder. "This ring," he said softly, "belonged to my sister Willow. She wore it the day she left this house, swearing never to return." His eyes lifted, locking with mine. Strange that it should surface now. The tension was unbearable. Robert tried to seize the moment. "You see, she's been stealing, Uncle. Dismiss her before she drains you further." Harold turned the ring over once more, then placed it carefully on the desk. Or he murmured, "Perhaps it is not she who has been stealing, but fate returning what was lost." A silence heavier than thunder filled the room. Robert's smirk faltered. My breath caught in my chest, because in that instant, with everyone watching, I felt the ground shift beneath me. The ring was not just a trinket. It was a key one that unlocked a truth no accusation could bury. And soon, that truth would tear the Whitmore family apart. The study smelled of leather and storm. The emerald ring sat between us on the polished oak desk, its green stone catching stray flashes of lightning from the window. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was Harold's uneven breath rattling like paper in the wind. Then he said it. "This ring belonged to Willow Whitmore, my sister. Your grandmother, Robert. Your aunt." And his eyes shifted to me. "Perhaps someone else's blood, though they don't yet know it." The words hung in the air like a verdict. My knees nearly buckled. Robert laughed too loudly, shaking his head, as if to dispel the tension. "A convenient tale, Uncle. You find a nurse who humors your stories, and suddenly she's family. Please. She's a thief, and now you want to make her an heir." But Harold didn't answer Robert. His gaze was locked on me. "Nora. Your middle name. What is it?" I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "Elizabeth. Nora Elizabeth Bennett." The room erupted. A cousin gasped. An aunt muttered a prayer. Robert slammed his fist against the mantel, sending dust raining down. "Coincidence?" he roared. "Half the world is named Elizabeth. You're reaching, Uncle." Harold ignored him. His hand trembled as he reached for the ring again. "When you came here, Nora, you carried something else. Not just yourself. A locket. May I see it?" The blood drained from my face. My hand instinctively went to the chain beneath my blouse. That silver teardrop locket, the one piece of my mother I still carried. I pulled it free and placed it in Harold's palm. He opened it slowly, reverently, his breath hitching when he saw the faded photograph inside. "Yes," he whispered. "Willow. My sister. Your grandmother." The room froze. For me, the world spun. "That can't be," I whispered. "My mother never said." My voice broke. She told me her family was gone. Robert surged forward, his face twisted with fury. "You planted that trinket! You're manipulating him in his weakness!" Harold's eyes blazed. Silence. "Robert, weakness. You think pain has clouded my mind? My mind is clearer now than it has ever been. I see through greed, through pretense, through every vulture circling this room. And I see her." His voice cracked but did not waver. "I see my blood in her eyes." Tears blurred my vision. I shook my head, torn between disbelief and the ache of something I'd never dared hope for. Family. A name that meant I wasn't alone. The lawyer, Mr. Howard, who had been silent until then, cleared his throat. His presence was calm, deliberate. Mr. Whitmore anticipated these objections, he said. He requested certain verifications. "What verifications?" Robert spat. Mr. Howard opened his briefcase and produced a sealed envelope. "A DNA analysis conducted months ago. Sample taken from a glass Miss Bennett used in her first week of employment. Compared with the Whitmore family line." He placed the document flat on the desk, sliding it toward Harold. The results confirmed a direct match. Gasps, shouts, a woman's voice cracked. "Impossible." My hands trembled so badly I couldn't steady myself. "You tested me without telling me." Harold's eyes softened. I had to know. I couldn't risk hope without proof. "Forgive me, child." But it was the only way. Robert lunged forward, snatching the document, his eyes scanning with frantic desperation. When he reached the conclusion, his jaw locked. He tore the page in half, then in quarters, before flinging it into the fire. The flames consumed it greedily, spitting sparks. But it didn't matter. The truth was already spoken, already seen. The ring, the locket, the name, the blood. I wasn't just a nurse anymore. I was a Whitmore. And the room that had scorned me seconds before now stared with something new, fear. Because with truth came power, and with power came war. The fire crackled as the DNA report burned, but the silence in the study roared louder than any flame. Every pair of eyes darted between me, Harold, and the smoldering remnants of the truth Robert had tried to destroy. I stood frozen, my hand gripping the locket at my chest, the chain biting into my skin. My world had split in two. Nurse, heiress, stranger, family. Finally, Harold's voice broke through, fragile yet commanding. "You can burn paper, Robert, but you cannot burn blood." Robert's face twisted, red veins pulsing at his temple. Blood. He spat the word like poison. "You would throw away your legacy, our legacy, on her. A nurse who stumbled into your house 6 months ago." Harold's gaze sharpened. "She didn't stumble. She stayed. When every one of you abandoned me, she stayed." Whispers rippled among the gathered relatives. A cousin hissed, "This is madness." Another muttered, "We'll contest the will." But I barely heard them. My chest heaved as I turned to Harold, my voice trembling. "Why me? Why now? Why not tell me sooner?" His eyes glistened, and for the first time I saw regret carved deep into his features. "Because I feared losing you too. I lost Willow when pride divided us. I lost your mother when silence became easier than truth. I couldn't face the chance that you might reject me before I even tried." The room blurred through my tears. All my life I thought I had no one, that my family ended with my mother. You let me believe that. Harold's voice cracked. And I was wrong. Every day without you was punishment enough. But these months, Nora, you gave an old man dignity when no one else would. You saw me, not my wealth, not my reputation. Just me. The cousins scoffed, but their protests faltered when Mr. Howard rose again. He carried another envelope sealed with crimson wax. Mr. Whitmore anticipated this as well. He left behind a letter. Perhaps it is time we hear it. Robert sneered. Another trick. But my heart pounded as the lawyer broke the seal and unfolded the paper. His steady voice filled the room. My dearest Nora Elizabeth, if you are hearing these words, then fate has been kinder to me than I deserve. You have seen me as no one else has. You have reminded me that kindness is wealth beyond measure. And now I must give you what others have mistaken for my true legacy, my fortune. But know this, it is not the money I want you to inherit. It is the chance to right what I could not, to choose people over pride, to choose love over loneliness. I know my family will fight this. They will sneer, they will accuse, they will burn paper and poison rooms with their greed. But the truth cannot be erased. You are my blood. You are my sister's grandchild. You are my niece. Use what I leave you not to live as I did, but to live as I wished I had. Make me proud, child. All my love, Harold Whitmore. The study fell silent. Not the silence of disbelief this time, but of reckoning. I could hardly breathe. The letter blurred in my vision. My lips trembled as I whispered, "Why didn't my mother tell me? Why did she hide all this?" Mr. Howard's expression softened. There is more. He reached into the envelope and drew out a second page. Your mother left you something too. A note Harold kept never able to send. His voice lowered as he read, My Nora, if you ever learn the truth, know that I kept it from you not out of malice but out of fear. I wanted you to have a life free of the Whitmore shadows. Your grandfather and I walked away from wealth because we believed love mattered more. Perhaps we were wrong to keep you from your roots, but we were right about you. You are strong, you are kind, and you will make your own legacy. Carry this locket and remember me, but do not let the past define you. With love, always, Mother. The letter fell from Mr. Howard's hand as tears flooded my vision. My mother's voice, reaching across time, wrapped around me like a final embrace. Robert's fury exploded. Lies, forgeries. You'll never take what belongs to us. But even his rage sounded hollow now. The others shifted uncomfortably, their certainty unraveling. Harold leaned forward, his frail hand reaching for mine. His grip was weak, but his eyes burned with intensity. Do you see now, child? It was never about money. It was about blood, about love, about legacy. The storm outside roared wind, rattling the windows as if echoing the tempest within. My tears fell freely. My knees buckled, and for a moment I let myself collapse into the chair beside him, my hand still locked in his. I don't know if I can do this, I whispered. I'm not like you. I don't belong in this world. Harold shook his head. You belong more than any of them, because you care. And that is worth more than every dollar in this house. Robert lunged forward, then shoving the desk, sending the ring clattering to the floor. Enough, you'll regret this, Uncle. We'll take it all in court. And when we do, she'll crawl back to whatever hole she came from. I flinched, but before I could speak, Harold's frail voice thundered louder than the storm. If she falls, Robert, then this entire family falls with her, because she is the last true Whitmore standing. The words struck the room like lightning, gasps, shouts, tears, and me caught in the center of it all, trembling as the weight of two legacies pressed down. Blood, love, legacy, and in that moment I understood this wasn't just about inheritance. It was about identity, about who I had been and who I would become. The storm had passed by the time we left the study. The Whitmore estate was quiet, its corridors lined with portraits of ancestors who seemed to watch us with judging eyes. I carried the locket against my chest, the weight of it heavier now than ever. Harold had been taken to his room to rest. Robert had stormed out, swearing lawsuits, his voice fading into the night like thunder retreating into the hills. I stood alone in the library, staring at the emerald ring on the floor where it had fallen. Its green stone gleamed in the faint firelight. I bent, picked it up, and for the first time felt its meaning settle into my palm. It was not wealth. It was history. It was blood. Mr. Howard entered quietly. "Miss Bennet," he said, his voice measured, "the decision is yours now. The estate, the fortune, the legacy. You can fight for it, or you can walk away." I closed my eyes. Images swirled my mother's weary smile, Harold's fragile hand gripping mine, the angry faces of those who despised me, and the faces of patients I once dreamed of helping, if only I had the means. The choice was terrifying. To step into this legacy meant carrying the weight of pride, greed, and expectation. To walk away meant losing the chance to turn Harold's last wish into something greater. I opened my eyes, the ring warm in my hand. "Family isn't just about blood," I whispered. "It's about what you do with it." The lawyer studied me, then nodded slowly. "Then perhaps that is your answer." The fire popped in the hearth, sending a single spark upward. I tucked the locket beneath my blouse, placed the ring on the desk, and turned toward the window where the first light of dawn broke over the horizon. For the first time, I wasn't just a nurse. I wasn't just an outsider. I was someone standing at the crossroads of love and legacy with a choice that would define not just my future, but the meaning of the Whitmore name. And so I ask you in the end, would you claim the inheritance? Or would you choose to walk away?